What's up, millennials? How high do you think Bitcoin is going to go within 5 years' time? Today we're going to talk about the different narratives for Bitcoin, the price predictions from professionals, and also a simple model to calculate the exact price target for Bitcoin in 2025. So let's do it. Let's first talk a little bit about the narratives for Bitcoin, because I believe that Bitcoin doesn't have just one single narrative, but I believe it has different narratives at the same time. And that is a little bit comparable to what is happening with gold, for example. As you can see in this chart of Statista.com, we can see that about 46% of the gold demand comes from investment, so gold as an investment. About 37% is used in jewelry, 8.5% is used by central banks, and about 8% is used by technology. So basically the gold that is in cell phones, for example. And a while ago, Nick Carter, and if you don't know Nick Carter, you should definitely check him out on Twitter. He creates a lot of great content, Bitcoin related, of course. And he came up with this model, if you will, of a different or an image of all the different narratives of Bitcoin so far since 2009, which of course was the inception of Bitcoin all up until 2018. So we can see that it has shifted over time too, because in 2009 we saw that Bitcoin was mainly eCash, a proof of concept. It was also a censorship-resistant gold, and it was also a cheap payment network at that time. But that has shifted over time. We see, for example, that if you look at 2012, you can see that the amount of Bitcoin used for anonymous darknets is going up quite a lot. But now in 2018, so a few years ago, we can see that the majority of Bitcoin, the most important narratives for Bitcoin, if you will, is that it is a censorship-resistant gold. Apart from that, you can also see that something else that is very important is that it could be a reserve currency for crypto, for the entire crypto universe, if you will. And of course, also, if you look at the pink in the upper right-hand corner, you can see that it is becoming more and more an uncorrelated financial asset too. So when you look at the future, and I'm just going to project my personal opinion here, of course, this is not necessarily your opinion. You always need to think about what you believe is going to happen in the future. But I believe that Bitcoin continues to have different narratives at the same time also in the future. And I believe that we might see a real world on the one hand and a digital world on the other hand. And I believe that Bitcoin could become the main currency that is going to be used in this digital world, in this crypto world at some point in time. I also believe that the Bitcoin as a payment network is going to be more and more important, mainly because of these layer 2 solutions that are being developed right now. If you, for example, know about the Lightning Network, that is hopefully going to be very important in the next coming years, but right now it hasn't been rolled out that much just yet, and it hasn't got a lot of usage just yet either. And I believe that not only in the digital world that Bitcoin could become very important as that main currency and as that payment network, but I believe that in the real world it's also going to be important. It is going to be used, in my opinion, by, for example, companies and also by some other people, some banks, for example. It could be seen as that censorship-resistant electronic gold, that digital gold, if you will. So I believe that the gold narrative is still going to be very important in the future. I also think the uncorrelated financial asset is going to be an important narrative too, mainly because of investors who are looking more and more at new assets they can actually invest their money in. And especially if it's an uncorrelated financial asset, meaning that if the stock market goes up, it doesn't necessarily mean that Bitcoin also goes up. So that is usually very interesting for investors, because that way they can diversify a little bit better. And yeah, that's of course very good for them. And I also believe that another narrative could become very important, which not even is on this image right here. I believe that Bitcoin as a corporate cash could be very important, because right now we see multiple companies, MicroStrategy, Tesla, for example, using Bitcoin to put that on their balance sheet in order to not lose out on their money by inflation. Because some companies have like billions of dollars sitting around, and that is just a melting ice cube, if you will, if you just let it sit there and lose because of the inflation year over year over year. So I believe that more and more companies could become, or could actually do that too. They could also become, or they could also put the Bitcoin on their balance sheet in order to not lose out on money in the long term. So I believe that those could be the future narratives of Bitcoin, potentially in like 5 to 10 years or so. And because there are so many narratives for Bitcoin, it becomes very difficult to put a specific price target on Bitcoin or a specific market cap on Bitcoin, because every single narrative is going to have its own total addressable market, if you will, its own price target. Let's actually briefly go through a few price predictions by professionals, not only the ultra bears, but also the ultra bulls, of course. And let's start out with Dan Peña. He is mainly known for his predictions that Bitcoin is going to absolute zero. You might want to watch this video, very funny. But yeah, he does believe that Bitcoin is going to go to zero. Peter Schiff, a well-known Bitcoin bear, says that a temporary move to 100,000 could be possible, but he does believe that also in the long term, Bitcoin is going to go to zero too. Then if we take a look at JP Morgan, the bank, of course, they have a price target of 130,000 for Bitcoin in the long term. Tim Draper, a venture capitalist, thinks that Bitcoin is going to 250,000 by 2022. Anthony Pompliano, who you might know, he is on YouTube and he's very important for the Bitcoin community. He says that Bitcoin might go to 250,000 too by 2022, and he has a long-term price target of $1 million per coin. Plan B, my fellow Dutchman, he has a stock-to-flow model, and that stock-to-flow model says that we might hit $288,000 by 2022. Max Keiser, a Bitcoin maximalist who shouted all kinds of weird stuff about Elon Musk, he believes that Bitcoin is going to 400,000. Guggenheim, an investment group, also believes that it's going to go to 400,000. Then you've got the Winklevoss twins, they believe that it's going to 500,000 by 2030. Cathie also has a long-term price target of 500,000. And Michael Saylor, who is the CEO of MicroStrategy, who might be one of the biggest bulls in the market right now, believes that Bitcoin is going to have a market cap of $100 trillion, which would give Bitcoin a price target of $5 million per coin. So as you can see, these price targets from these professionals are different, very, very different from each other. Some have a price target of 0, some have a price target of 5 million. So it's very difficult to come up with a price target for yourself too. Now, what I usually do is, instead of having just one target, I usually have multiple targets. Then I assign a probability to those targets, just a probability that I believe is true. And then I'm going to combine all of these probabilities, all of these expected values into one. So that is what we are going to do as well. We are going to come up with an expected value model that we can use to predict the price for Bitcoin. Because the problem is, there are a lot of people who say, well, Bitcoin is definitely going to go to zero, or it's definitely going to go to 100,000 by 2025, or 500,000 by 2025. And they assign basically a probability of 100% to that outcome. But I believe that every probability, or every outcome actually, has its own probability. So what we are going to do is to come up with an expected value for Bitcoin in 2025, so in 4 years' time, of course, which is the year after the next halving. So that is very important to keep in mind. So let's now just go through these outcomes and the probabilities. So the first outcome for me is $0. And of course, keep in mind, this is a very simplified expected valuation model. You could make it a little bit more complex, but yeah, I do want to keep it as simple as possible so you can understand it very well too. So I believe one of the outcomes for Bitcoin is $0 in 2025. I believe that the likelihood of this happening is very low. I believe that it could happen in like 1% of the cases. So I assigned a probability of 1% to the outcome of $0 in 2025. To $20 or $20,000, of course, in 2025. I believe it could happen, but I do think that if we go to $20,000 in 2025, well, Bitcoin has probably kind of failed, in my opinion, and it's not going to be worth a lot more in the future. So I definitely think that Bitcoin is going to have to become worth more and more over time and not stay at just $20,000. So I believe that this could happen, of course, but I again believe that this probability, this likelihood is very low, so I assigned a probability of 4% to this outcome of $20,000 by 2025. Then $50,000, which of course is a little bit higher than where we are right now, but it is a price we have already seen in the past. And also I believe here, if we have $50,000 Bitcoin by 2025, I kind of think that Bitcoin hasn't really achieved its full potential. So I believe it could definitely happen, but I believe the chances are relatively low. I think 10% could be a decent probability for this outcome. Then $100,000, and here is where things become a little bit more interesting, because I think that $100,000 could be a possibility. I personally believe that $100,000 is going to be happening sooner than in 2025. I think that this could happen potentially even this year, or if not, maybe next year in 2022. But I think that if we could definitely have a price target of 100,000 by 2025. I would assign a probability of 20%. And then $250,000. I believe personally this is the most likely outcome in my opinion. I think I could definitely be wrong here, but I do think that we could have a high probability of achieving this price target by 2025. I'm going to assign a probability of 40%. Then $500,000. This is of course a very important level, because at $500,000 per Bitcoin, the market cap of Bitcoin becomes about $10 trillion, which more or less is the same as gold right now. So if we would achieve a price of $500,000, then that would mean we have basically become the digital gold. So I think this could definitely happen, and I'm going to assign a probability of 20%, just like the option of 100,000. And then $1 million. Personally, I'm not that bullish just yet. This could happen at some point in our future, but I'm not sure. I don't really think that this is going to happen by 2025 or before 2025. I think it could happen, but again, I think the likelihood is quite low, so I'm going to assign a probability of 5%. So if you add up all of these probabilities, you would arrive at 100%, which of course is what you're going to need. And here is the list of all the expected values for each of the outcomes. So for example, if you have a target of $20,000 and you assign a probability of 4%, then the expected value for this option is going to be $800. If you have, for example, a price target, an outcome of $500,000 and the probability is 20%, then the expected value for that outcome is $100,000. So when you have all of these probabilities, of course, all of these targets, all of these outcomes, then you can add up all of these expected values to come up with the total expected value for Bitcoin in this case by 2025. And that in this case would be a little bit more than $275,000. Now, this is something that can definitely change over time. My opinion is going to change over the next coming years, probably. I might become more bullish about Bitcoin if we see more usage, for example, if we see the Lightning Network being built out a little bit more. But I could also become more bearish instead if we see, for example, no usage at all. Maybe another cryptocurrency is going to take over the role of Bitcoin. That could happen potentially with some altcoins out there. So yes, I could definitely change my opinion in the next coming months, in the next coming years, in the next coming decades. So what I would like to do is I would like to invite you to do the same for Bitcoin, and potentially if you want also for the other crypto coins, cryptocurrencies out there, and potentially if you want even for stocks. Now, if you liked this expected valuation model, please consider sharing this video with your friends who are also investing in the stock market. And of course, I'm also very much looking forward to hearing from you as well, to hear your price targets for Bitcoin by 2025. So let me know in the comments. And with that being said, thank you very much for taking the time to watch this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.